please join me in welcoming Christine, who will introduce our panelists to the stage.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, I feel so centered and at peace after that last exercise. I love that we were all able to reset and connect with everyone in this room, because it is a really sort of relevant and fitting exercise to do before this conversation that we're about to have. I think everybody in this room understands the power of storytelling and understands how key it is in the absence of having the privilege to live in many different places and travel and meet many different people, which is a privilege that most of us don't have. Really how important storytelling is to bridge gaps, understand others, expose yourselves to culture, and increasing advocacy within storytelling being such a pivotal driver in that diversification. Less than 1% of Hollywood on-screen characters are of Muslim representation and identity, and the representation that we do have is often fraught with stereotyping or overgeneralizations or lack of nuance, and so the work that these ladies are doing is really, really key to driving representation forward. So we're so proud of them, and we're so lucky to have them on stage with us today. I am not Muslim by descent, but I am a representative of Gold House. I was raised with the faith, and so, you know, it's such an honor for me to be up here today. And Gold House, working with MPAC and collaborating is so important to us. 62% of Muslims worldwide are based in Asia, and so having that representation and having this partnership is certainly so important to us. So without further ado, our first panelist is Arij Makati. She is the VP of Programming at Pillars Fund. And then we also have Sanaz Al-Safar, who is the Executive Director of Storyline Partners.
Hi, friends.
Hello, hello. I love that we just have like two panelists. It feels like a fireside chat. But I would love to get started with just introduce yourself a little bit more beyond what I just did now, which was really just your headline, and a headline is just a headline. But would love to hear about the work that you're doing and how you got to where you are now and what really drew you to the space.
Sanaz, come on. This is just going to be a hang. I hope that's okay with everybody. Assalamu alaikum. My name's Arij. I'm the Vice President of Programs at Pillars Fund. We're an organization that seeks to uplift the leadership, narratives, and talents of Muslims in the United States and UK. Our organization, our signature program is really a filmmaking fellowship, which we actually have one of our fellows here today. It's Mo Balaji. Hey, buddy. And we have an alumni here. It's Aqsa. There might be some other people in the room, but I can't see them. But we are really, really looking to create an opportunity for Muslims to be in the mainstream, center ourselves in our own stories, and be in the driver's seat of telling our own stories. And making sure that our own stories aren't just about being Muslim, but Muslims just doing the things that we all do every day. And we are super excited about doing all that work because we believe that changing the representation of Muslims is what changes people's beliefs about Muslims, which is what changes people's behaviors towards Muslims, which is what changes people's opportunities to vote and policy change and their beliefs towards policies and what happens to Muslims, both here and abroad. So we really believe in that work, and I'm very, very excited to do it. You want me to talk about how I got here?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a recovering actor. Thank God. And back in the day, when I was still acting, I was sent out on a lot of auditions to be terrorist number 3's wife, which is so offensive because I'm clearly a terrorist number 1 wife. And that was not why I got into storytelling. I always believed that storytelling was a really powerful engine for social change. And it was just so devastating and deeply demoralizing to feel like that was the only space for me as a Lebanese Muslim immigrant woman in the States. And I was like, there's so much more to me. There's so much more that I can do. And where push came to shove is based off of a reel. I got an offer to be on a show, which will not be named because this is being recorded. But I got an offer to be on a show that featured a main character who was a Muslim FBI agent. And I personally, this is my personal belief, I'm an abolitionist. And so I just drew the line at propaganda. And no judgment for whatever other people believe, but I just did not have any interest in telling a story that sort of said that the only good Muslim in America is someone who will participate in the oppression of other people to show their commitment to this country. That was just not something I was interested in. And it created a real rift between me and my manager. And so I stopped acting. I was like, okay, this is just not something that is here for me at this moment in 2019. It may never be an opportunity for me. And I stopped. And about 3 months later, Kashif Sheikh, who was the founder and president of Pillars Fund, called me and he said, I have an idea. And I think that we should maybe start a part of our organization that's all about shifting stories so that the organizations we work with are swimming with the current of culture instead of so strongly against it. This is at a time, this is gonna sound really, really deja vu right now, but it was at a time where Trump had, the Muslim ban was fully law at that point. Our organizations were fighting really, really hard to just explain who we were instead of who we were not, playing defense instead of offense. And he was like, we just got to help him out. We got to help him out with telling these great stories that tell the truth about our communities. It's really that simple. And I said, okay, let's do it. And so that's really how it came to be, is just a real dissatisfaction with what my opportunities were and really wanting to change that world for other storytellers. And that's how I got here.
You became the change you wanted to see.
I tried to. We'll see. Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah.
Hello, everyone. I am Executive Director of Storyline Partners, and we are a nonprofit collective of issue and advocacy organizations, of which MPAC is one. And essentially, we consult on all entertainment narratives, films, podcasts, gaming, scripted, unscripted. But we're a bit special because we came about during who I call Chidolini, 45's administration. And a bunch of us, came together. What can we do? What are the parameters? And so a collective was born. We've been now in existence for about 5 years, and we work really closely with some, prominent studios and writers. But my journey to this work is a little bit different than Arige's. I had no interest in Hollywood. I mean, I grew up surrounded by culture, recognizing the power of cinema and very much enculturated in that world. But I wanted to be a human rights litigator. I wanted to go to The Hague and prosecute. At that time, it was Saddam. I'm an Iranian, first gen, particularly from the south, Abadan, and it was decimated by the Iran-Iraq war. And so my parents had to stay. We were the first wave of immigrants. They were university students when the Islamic Revolution happened. I was born, and then that gets bookended with, the hostage crisis. And then probably mid-'80s, I'm aging myself. I'm playing a game with my father, and it was Trivial Pursuit. I don't know if anyone remembers this game. One of the questions was, what is the most hated country? For Americans in the 80s. And my dad pauses, and I'm probably like 7, 8, and I can read, right? And grew up in a household in which, because they could not go back and their hometown was destroyed, and policy was dictating so much of the imagery, the visual aesthetics, the language that Americans saw, day in and day out. My dad armed me, right? Like, it was just like a preparation for, you have to understand how to navigate as you move forward. Because unfortunately, these sound bites are way stronger than what I'd like to explain, right? These 30-second clips do more damage. And this is why I think our work is really important, is because I sit them down and say, hey, executive 1 and 2, showrunner number 1 and 2, I need you to understand the history and the context of what got us here. And so I was a junior in 9/11. That was a very fun time. And really understood the interplay between culture and policy and how much there is that feedback loop, right? There's a famous quote. I'm going to nerd out for a second. Jack Valenti, who was the former president of the Motion Pictures of America Association and former advisor for President Johnson, said that Hollywood and DC spring from the same DNA. And so by that point in my consciousness, I realized this is exactly it. The war on terror language, started in the 90s, but really amped up by the time, I was graduating undergrad. And then grad school, it was just a whole other ball game. And cut to I'm now seeing scripts and projects that are revising the history of the past 25 years that we've endured, which is terrifying to me. Because although there have been some advances, and there is this panel, there's the Muslim House, there's Doris Duke supporting all of these great, orgs and MPAC, thank God for MPAC, and Pillars Fund, there seems to be a reversion going back. And it's very disconcerting as our ability to show our dissent is also being criminalized. So all of the ways in which we can protest, essentially, right, within the bounds of what Western media calls civility, and we lack the civility, right? We're barbarians. All of this, long story short, really, really had an impact on me in the way that I see. So a lot of my approach to this work and what I advise with my colleagues is that we have to speak about this confluence of culture, policy, and people. Language is constantly evolving. Policy is dictating some decisions for Hollywood. Hollywood is supporting some decisions, for DC. And so how do we be that intermediary? I'm almost done with my diatribe. One last thought is, going back to these sound bites, ideally, I wish we had infrastructure to start from journalism and then carry through into cinema, television, cultural production, however it manifests, because that's where we got to upend it, is immediately from there, right? So when you see Syrian refugees, Afghan refugees, refugees from Africa, Congo, Sudan, being labeled as less than and othered, but then we have Ukrainian refugees, with like what is it, the red carpet, the language is very different. And why is that, right? We'll continue to go on there. But the Orientalism essentially is at the root of my work, and Edward Said and Stuart Hall and all the greatest, bell hooks. Anyhow, I'm going to stop there, but that's where all this came.
But I do want to ask, tactically speaking, when you reference this desire for having infrastructure in storytelling and more in media, what are some examples of all those components? Language you brought up, of course, but would love to hear about what the structure of that infrastructure looks like.
Well, on one end, it's the funders, right? We're very much beholden to that because the production companies don't have money. The studios right now we're seeing essentially everyone obeying. And that is really disconcerting to me as someone who, first gen again, where if I were to go back to Iran, First Amendment, that doesn't exist there, right? In the way that is conceived here. And so I think we need funders, we need funding, we need to continue to proselytize, which is not the best word, but essentially what we need to do with decision makers. We need more of us to become the decision makers. There's a lot of discussion about, the upending of distribution and what does that look like. So throughout every part of this creative ecosystem, there needs to be innovation's used a lot, that aspect, but also a reconfiguration, right? Like what can we do? And I'm interested in upending status quo because this isn't working for anybody.
There is a quote that I've been thinking about a lot lately, not just in the sense of Hollywood, but in the sense of the macro of what's happening in the world with the LA fires, which is where I live, where Senes lives. We live in the same neighborhood, actually. We live right across the street from each other. And the quote is from a cultural critic who passed away just a couple years ago. He says, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I actually think even for me, someone who is like a hyper leftist, hyper anti-capitalist, like again, on a personal level, that's true for me too, because it feels so difficult to dismantle on a large scale. It just feels impossible in some ways. But I think that you're exactly right, that the only way to beat this white whale is decentralization. I think that right now, there's this really important work that we're both doing, and I think we have to keep doing, of working from the inside, and a lot of us are working from the inside. But what I love about being here at Sundance as well, and like being in the independent space, is the decentralization of art. And this is where we see some of like the riskiest, bravest, most odds-defying storytelling happen. And this is why it's one of my favorite places and festivals to be. And I feel like we need to be investing in those spaces even more and supporting those spaces even more. And I feel like one of the most important things you can do and we can do is we have to educate our audiences how to support odds-defying storytelling. It's not gonna work without us imagining how to do that. So that's like a very actionable thing that we can do, is we have to teach the industry how to reimagine what is possible and what they can fund with, like, reteach them like what risk aversion should be and what they should be afraid of and what they shouldn't be afraid of, and what they should be excited about, what they shouldn't be excited about. Because right now they have these really archaic old comps, and the world has changed so much since those comps. They have these comps that are just so outdated in terms of what the population is like, what people are interested in. They're like, well, we've never told a Muslim story before. Well, guess what? 1 in 4 people in the world is Muslim. And this is a global economy, and 25% of the world wants to see themselves on screen, I think. I would imagine so. And if you'd like to keep making money, that's probably gonna matter. So I think we have to just educate audiences to show up for ourselves too.
So sorry to piggyback off of what you're going to say. Something that I've been ruminating on a lot was after Zandagi Azadi, Women Life Freedom movement in Iran. I was really amazed at the shift that I was seeing within cultural production and entertainment sector, right? So the Grammys, right, that special award to Shervin, a lot of, female Iranian actresses getting more shine than we've ever had. More articles, and this just wasn't in the States and France and UK, so on and so forth. And I paused because from one end, I was really happy. I was like, finally, they see my people as human, right? Like, we have feelings, we bleed just like you do, we're vibrant, don't mess with a Persian woman, like all those things, right? They're so brave. But then on the other end, I realized, oh my God, like, this is still Islamophobia. The only reason why there is such energy to support this movement is because they don't like us. And so anything that's related to Islam, and I'm not advocating for this regime by any stretch of the imagination. My family has lost a lot, and many families have. But at the end of the day, my concern is the population inside that country, diaspora, and everyone else, right? And so this really heavy thought, right? Like, that light just was like, oh, that's why. So when we get those moments is because, see, you guys are barbaric. Women have no rights. You guys don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. And that's not true, right? There needs to be nuance. Obviously, that regime has its own philosophy, right? And they're always pitting, sex and all the things, and I won't go into that. But that comes up a lot. Or Malala Yousafzai, right? The girls' education campaign. She was great, but then until she starts to advocate for other issues that affect the ummah, then she's not good. Same thing with Greta Thunberg, right? And so I digress, but all this to say that I think there are advances, but at the root of it, there's still that ugliness. And there are, they don't want to let go of that ugliness either, even when they know us. And they have dinner with us, or they're dating us, or, sorry, astaghfirullah, this is a Muslim house. But you know what I mean? Like, getting to know us on a friend level.
Talking.
Breathing.
And you ladies touched on this a little bit, but I was going to ask, in terms of, and maybe this is in the context of the work that you've done as an advisor and as a consultant, or maybe it's an example that you've seen out in the market, but as it relates to storytelling, like, are there examples from the recent past that you feel comfortable mentioning, saying were egregious? Are there examples that you think are great and sort of captured this wonderful nuance? And what really, in your eyes and with your expert perspective, made it a really nuanced and legitimate portrayal that you wanted to see more of?
Okay, there are so many things I'm incredibly excited about, and surprised, they're all made by Muslim people. How? Why? Why did that work out? Okay, so one thing I want to just really shout out, because I'm incredibly excited about this, and I see Amal Iqbal in the back. He's on this show. Delhi Boys is coming out soon.
March 6th.
March 6th on Hulu, and I'm incredibly excited about that show. I know MPAC did some consulting on that as well, and they were involved in it from the beginning. I am so excited about it. It's about Pakistani brothers who are like these trust fund babies. their father dies and leaves them this deli that they think they're going to run, and then they realize he's been running this underground drug ring. And it's an incredibly violent and pure comedy that is just so stupid and silly, and I mean that as like the highest compliment. And I feel like what's so great about that is we get to be flawed people that don't have to be perfect on screen. And the thing that I love about shows like this is we don't have to have a PSA about how perfect we are. That's actually such a trap. I find that, like something that I worked really closely on with my friend Rami Youssef is his show Rami. And I think I'm so proud of that show and the representation on that show. But there was so much pressure on it because it was first. And I think everybody was like, well, that's not my experience, or I don't know a Muslim exactly like that, or maybe I do, or whatever it was. But the problem is when you have one show, of course not. Mm-hmm. But if you have 50, then great. This one's like you, and this one's like your neighbor, and this one's like your cousin in London, and this one's like your mom. And guess what? Like, a white man can turn on the TV and literally flip through any channel and have 1,000 options of somebody like them, and somebody like their brother, and somebody like their son. And they have so many options of like, this is like me, and maybe this one's for me, maybe this one's not for me. And until we build that constellation, we're not going to have the freedom to do this type of thing, which is why I'm so excited for Deli Boys, because they took that big swing and they were like, whatever, like, we're gonna do the thing that we wanna see ourselves do. Like, we're not going to put the pressure on ourselves of having this like PSA of like, we have to look perfect. We're going to be brave and just be funny and do the thing we've always wanted to do. And I'm just extremely excited about that. So you should watch that. But obviously, I think Rami's amazing. I think We Are Lady Parts, who one of our current fellows, Warda, is a writer on, was phenomenal. If you haven't checked it out, you can watch it on Peacock. It's a British show. It's a show about these women, of this very diverse, both religiously, racially, ethnically, group of women who are Muslim that start a punk band in London. And it's so funny and it's so heartwarming, and the music rocks. I actually have it. I have the vinyl. I love it so much that I ordered it on vinyl. And I really recommend that, as well as quite a recent win that, for me as a woman, made me feel incredibly represented for the first time as a Muslim woman, where I was like, that's me. And that meant so much to me.
Sorry, it's like a wave of all the bad is coming, and I'm like, I want to focus on
the bad
good.
exists for sure.
So I'm thinking more in terms of characters, and one that I love is What We Do in the Shadows, which is Kayvon Novak. It's just absolutely brilliant, like of Muslim descent, and he completely upends all the stereotypes. And I don't get to see Iranian men as soft figures, right? And I grew up with one that was like that, a father that was very loving and completely, grounded and nice, not terrorist number 1 or 2, right? There's also Stewie Hosseini. Sorry, all my examples are Iranian. I should do better. From Succession, which was great. It's like, yeah, I believe that. You're a Persian investment banker. Totally, that tracks. But then again, not to focus on negative, but to sort of highlight again that the narratives are always surrounded around war on terror, American troops and their trauma, right? Like, that's always a thing. And I'm always asking writers, is it possible that we can flip that and maybe get it from that community or village that you went in your counterinsurgency, role? Or how can we start to see the other side? Because, well, and I know this is all myth-making and, national building and, security and surveillance and all those things that our country, unfortunately, really thrives on. But those are the narratives. And to Regis' point, I'd like to see really flawed, messy Muslim girls that don't necessarily wear hijab, right? Because that's more me.
Yeah, that's something we talk about at Gold House with our narrative change work a lot as well. My work at Gold House is funding independent filmmakers and finding great stories to be supporting. And when they ask me what kind of Asians, because that's really the requirement, we need Asians in a lead role, but like what kind of Asians? For me, it's like, I just want to diversify the diversity, and I want to see like an Asian who is failing school and, like something really messy. Like, let's just get the entire mosaic of experience out there, because that mosaic means human, right? And so once you don't really have to worry about this stereotype or this stereotype, because there are so many different portrayals on screen, is really when you feel like the work has, at least this portion at the character level, has been done. My last question, because I do want to see if the audience has any questions, but we've talked a lot about dismantling and decentralization at sort of all points of the decision-making when it comes to storytelling. Representation and education within executives, within the greenlighting process. You also spoke about making sure that the audiences go there and know how to get there and to support their own stories. In your work, as you have been having these conversations, no matter what the level, right? It might be with marketers and PR, it might be, at the writer level, it might be at the executive level. What are some of the strategies that you feel, or some of the key points that you find yourself needing to educate people on? I would love to hear, just get a glimpse of that work and what that experience has been like, and sort of what those talking points tend to be.
So I'm rooted at the story level. I'm working mainly with executives and writers and showrunners, and a lot of it is 101, unfortunately. It's that, like any other community, whether it be Black, Latine, Asian Americans, East Asian examples, where we're all monoliths, right? And it's so much of the work is the 101 of debunking that, and then showing all the different intersections that we can be. Like, did you know there's, Mexican Muslims? And it's, Latine Muslims are the fastest scoring in the US. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, how about we change that? Let's have a character that comes from that experience, right? So again, very much education 101. I think interpersonal relationships really do matter in this industry in general, but especially when you're trying to convince a mental shift, because once you're like, hey, let's rethink this, you're hoping they're not going to repeat that mistake again, and let's come in with something else, right? And then ideally, we'll just be defunct, right? But there's a lot of steps that need to happen until that. And I think it's very helpful to think interdisciplinary, because so much of our work requires that, along with dealing with talent that come from different sort of positionalities, right? And modes and platforms and however they manifest that cultural production. Reach?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for us, one of the biggest lessons, and the research that you talked about earlier was a partnership between us and the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative and Ford Foundation. It was actually the first ever quantitative analysis of how Muslims show up on screen. There were a lot of really great and profound qualitative analyses that had been done before, which to me should have been enough, honestly. But you have to speak Hollywood's language, and they like numbers. And so for us, one of the biggest pieces of learning was doing that study and actually just defining the problem for them. Because believe it or not, a lot of these companies were like, whoa, we did not know we had an Islamophobia problem. Like, they were shocked. They were shocked to hear that over 85% of Muslims that show up on screen are either victims or villains of violence.
Or oppressed women.
Yes, that's falls in that category for sure. They were surprised to hear that of 9,000 characters on screen, less than 1% were Muslim. They were surprised to hear that of those less than 1%, only 20% were women. And of those, the majority of those were wives or really irrelevant to the story. Yeah. And so when they got that data, they were like, oh, now we have these concrete points where it's not, your lived experience actually seems like there's data to back it up. And so leading with the data actually ended up being really helpful for us. And grounding them in that was speaking their language. And it automatically just sort of helped them understand that we were in a problem, and also provided them with a really concrete way to have a solution of this is missing, this is missing, this is missing, and then working from there to get to a lot more of a nuanced conversation.
If I may add something that just popped up, which is we don't really talk about the self-censoring that goes on in this industry, especially when it comes to our communities, whether you're Muslim or MENA, West Asia. There's a lot of that. And I think right after 9/11, for those that lived through that, the Patriot Act, those of us that were university students, there was such an intense climate of fear and a lot of retaliatory measures that were happening, which then, if you're an anti-war, protester, or you were part of any of those movements with the Iraq War, right, and then Afghanistan, it just was a very intense climate that we've never recovered. But there's been moments and pockets of like a little bit of that valve being released, right? And again, I want to thank MPAC and Obeidi especially, because without her, I wouldn't be here, right? Like, she put in the work. So when I come into that room, they're like, oh, okay. I'm not terrorist number 2, right? Even though that, like, we keep joking about that, but
Why
it's
do you
really...
keep putting yourself ahead of me? So rude.
So I want to highlight that, the censorship issue, because I feel like that's happening again. And personally, I know that I do that a lot to my detriment, because I don't want to lose the business. I don't want to lose the relationship. And, we're raised and trained, right, academically, professionally, and also personally, where you put your head down and you do your work, right? Those are our communities. And we've said something like that yesterday as well. But now there's this flame that I can no longer play that game either, but I'm not fully on that other side. I'm trying to figure it out to find the right balance between the radicality of the root, but also like, okay, systems change takes a minute, right? You can't change everything. I can't control every worker in the industry. I can't affect change with that one writer. And that to me is a win at this point, because in the current moment, it's more difficult.
So here's what I totally agree. And I think the way that we talk about that at Pillars, and we have a philosophy of the type of story we're really interested in, is there's really like 2 types of storytelling. There's let me in, I'm just like you. And that's fine. That's a type of storytelling, it's a choice. And there's check me out. We are very, very interested in a type of storytelling that says, check me out. We're gonna host a party that's so great that you're gonna come knock on the door and say, can I come in and check out the party? And it's really for us, by us storytelling. It's just profoundly great storytelling. And we know that if it's great, if it's Deli Boys and, we know that Uncle Iqbal is running an underground cocaine ring, I wanna check that out. I really wanna check you doing that out. Am I gonna get a discount for the cocaine? I might start. That might be my New Year's resolution. But I think that's really our philosophy. Is this a story, when we're looking at, our applicants, are you a let me in storyteller, are you a check me out storyteller? And that's really the way that we think about exactly what you just said, is how do you find that balance of the radicality and self-censorship? Just be a great storyteller that's all about check us out. And once you do that, I think we're golden.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's so beautifully put. And I think, nothing beats the numbers, but also you can't get past human connection, because it really requires understanding at an individual level to be able to then contribute to systemic change. And so I think the work that you're doing, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, ladies. Can we give them a round of applause? I think, Sue, can we take an audience question? Okay, 1 or 2 audience questions. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? Yes, in the back, in the white.
Hello, thank you for this panel. I just had a quick question about, a lot of people say that in the film space, and when you're developing a story, the end product doesn't end up looking anything like the beginning product. But how do you come across avoiding stereotypes being inserted into the character by gatekeepers or producers who are non-Muslim and kind of insert their opinion? They're like, well, this will sell better, or do you want to make the character more like this or more like their perception of like Indian or Muslim or stuff like that? Like, how do you avoid that and like draw a line and be like, nope, that's not like, none of this is true. We're not going to play into the stereotype.
So unfortunately, there's no binding mechanisms to like our consultations and recommendations, right? Like, I'll flag it as like a red tier, or say, okay, this is like, yield with caution. Sorry, the language again is war on terror for me. Remembering those warnings, if you remember that. Anyhow, so a lot of the times we give these notes, we sit down with the writer or in the writer's room or the executive and say, hey, listen, this is just grossly problematic for X, Y, and Z. Here's the research, here's the data, here's the community, right? And the way that, again, I advise is through criteria, right? It's protecting the artist and the IP, because that's their imagination and you don't want to thwart that. But you also want to protect it, right? And be as provocative as you want, but, just be careful. The second is the market, right? So what is the diaspora community? Or to your point about comps, right? Like, what does that look like? And then the third is the impact, is the community itself. Do we want to advance narrative shift, or do we still want to stay stuck in whatever that is? I have an example. I won't say the client, but most recently, a really over-the-top script, really over-the-top. Like, I hadn't read something like that in a really long time. And an executive is sitting with me and saying, okay, Sanaz, the word jihad kept coming up. And I said, it's not being defined, and this is a massive trigger word. I don't see the character development. I'm not understanding the world. All the things that you do, right, when you're giving notes. And they go, okay, Sanaz, what about this? Instead of 12 times, we'll do 6. And I'm looking at them like, are you understanding, again, the history and the context of what I'm trying to tell you? It's not that you have 100 jihads. Even one jihad, I don't understand why it needs to be in the script, right? If we're talking about internal struggle, okay, is there another word we can use? Or are you citing it on something on the Quran, right? Or is this, I don't know, something that has to be there? It's more the public imagination has been so warped on certain aspects of the deen. And for me, I keep getting these war on terror narratives. And I'm just like, God, really? Like, is this my test? Because there's only so much I can push back, right? So we give the notes, we give the research, we give the data, we look through those 3 criterias, to really get them. Some people get it and they're like, oh my God, we don't want to do that. Others are like, you know what? And again, what is the mentality and the personal philosophy of that executive also matters, right? And a lot of creators in here, I'm sure, have had experiences where, unfortunately, there are some bias and you can't shake that. But if you can't shake that, there's got to be 10 other executives that get the memo, or writers that want to do better, right? And, these dinosaurs hopefully are going to retire, forgive me, and, a new batch is going to come in that may be more receptive, because what are we now? Are we like 2 billion? How many of us are there now?
That's
1.8,
right.
1.5, I don't know, we're a lot, right? And so
1.9, I think.
they're losing money. Now, if that's what they want to do, great, but we'll go to Red Sea then.
Yes, and one way that we're trying to work on this at Pillars is we authored something called the Blueprint for Muslim Inclusion. You can find it online for free on our website. This is something we authored to socialize into major production companies, networks, film festivals, et cetera, that gives them really clear short, medium, long-term solutions for change that actually support them to support artists like all of you to protect their visions and guide people who might not be as familiar with Muslim folks and how to protect our integrity in the industry. So it's a resource that you can bring to them if you are creating a story and say, hey, this is a resource to start with. And we also partner with several companies that we've already socialized it into, for example, like Amazon. We also, I would say, that's our job to do for you. It's really scary as an independent artist to fight a battle, I think, like with these massive companies when you're like, dude, I have been working for 15 years to sell my script, and now I have to fight for my whole community and maybe lose every opportunity. That's too much to put on yourself. Call us in. Call in MPAC, call in Senna's, call in Storyline Partners, call in Pillars, call in all 3 of us. That's our job, is to protect you and have those conversations for you. So do that.
I'm glad you said that, because we work directly with these teams. And so every time I come across a writer, I'm like, tell them you want our support. And the last thing I will give a plug on is the Obeidi al-Sultani test, which is also another 5-part question that we give to executives, and we also create in-house what I call narrative readers. So we really go robust, like Cliff Notes, on history, context, language, problematic storylines and storylines we'd like to see. We're trying to make it so easy that you have enough to work with, right? And if you're still confused, please come reach out to us.
We love to end with a CTA and with resources. So thank you all so much. Thank you, MPAC, Doris Duke Foundation,
Thank
Muslim
you
House
so
for having
much,
us.
Sue.
Thank you so much for being
I
a
love
part
you.
of the conversation.
Thank you.
Doris Duke.